This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 19 and a half years, I've been building homes, and 95% of all of my homes have used Pella windows. I couldn't be happier to call them a partner in our builds and our remodels. Whether you're an architect, a designer, or a remodeler, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. They can fit old homes, new homes, reclaimed, commercial, and really everything in between. Pella is a company that we trust and that we recommend to our clients. Additionally, in management, Peter and Ed have just been absolute fantastic people to work with, as well as mentors to me personally. So when it comes time to look for a window, I'd highly recommend Pella windows. Find more at pellanorthland.com. Also, if you're interested, you can hear episode 1 where I interview Peter and Ed together for a great listen on business and Pella windows. If you're here local in Minnesota and want to network with other builders, we have the Curious Builder Collective. You can head to our website to find out what that is all about. We have 3 more 3-hour sessions coming up this year. We're basically a small group that has a room for 10 more builders. We currently have 20. We're going to cap it at 30. This is a way to test your theories, learn from each other, and elevate your brand and your business. Head to thecuriousbuilderpodcast.com to find out more about the Curious Builder Collective. Today in the podcast, we had John from Arbor Wood on from Duluth, Minnesota, and it was a real treat to have him on. His passion just pours out when you chat with him, and as you will listen here shortly, I think having a company and having a story that is so centered around your passion, but is also a leading edge in the market is something that's very captivating. So without further ado, we've got John with Arbor Wood, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today I'm joined with John Heyesen from Arbor Wood. Did I pronounce that right?
That's right.
All right. Local Minnesotan. So you're from Duluth, Minnesota?
I'm born and raised.
Woohoo. Yep. All right. Local Minnesota. You even drove down. I offered you a Zoom option. You're like, no, we do enough of that.
We got to come to the big city once in a while.
Let's go.
It's already summer down here.
I know. I ran into your thermally modified wood both at the International Builder Show, and I've been aware about it for the last couple of years. I tried to spec it recently on a home, and I just thought it'd be really fun to hear your story, in person. So let's talk a little bit about Arbor Wood. Let's talk about you. I know you have a few other companies, and we'll just kind of dive into your origin story.
Yeah, sounds great, Mark. So Arbor Wood Co. We're a Minnesota-based manufacturer of thermally modified wood. I'll get into thermally modified wood in a bit, but we're kind of on the vanguard of a movement that's sweeping really at a global level, kind of has origins in Europe. But my origin story really starts with building materials at large. So we do run 2 businesses up in Duluth, Minnesota, Arbor Wood Co., of course, being one of them. The other company is called Intextural. Interesting name. It's really an amalgamation of intelligent and architectural. And I think within that gives a little bit of visibility into kind of the tenets of what we do at Intextural, which is really curating innovative building materials, raising awareness so that builders, architects, DIYers, makers have access to materials that perform well, that are aesthetically very beautiful, and then all have kind of a sustainability narrative woven through them.
Which, maybe before we get into the differences between the 2 companies, how'd you get here?
Yeah, so I'm a tech geek. I came up in the tech industry. I've been a kind of a computer nerd since I was a little kid, and had a fascination with technology, how things work, which leads to how things are made and how things are broken and how things can be fixed again, and have also had a passion for design, architecture, things that are visually pleasing. And I came up in the tech industry. I helped scale a few tech companies, and had an opportunity to jump into the architectural building materials industry, and that's Intextural. And that's been almost a decade ago, and was hired to really help scale the business. We've since purchased the business, and part of the scaling story with Intextural is Arbor Wood.
Interesting. Yeah. How were you here locally in Minnesota the whole time, or did you usually when people think tech, or at least me, it's like, you went to California?
I was. No, I've been here the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the Twin Cities for a bit, but Duluth. Yeah, Twin Cities, always Minnesota.
Walk us through. I mean, that's kind of cool. Let's start there. I guess you were brought on to scale a company. Not only did you scale it, you bought it. Mm-hmm, right. It's a pretty awesome story. There's got to be some juicy tales there. Why don't you give us a quick intro to how that happened?
Well, the origin stories actually starts in skateboarding, and so there were a few brothers, Bloomington-based brothers, actually. And a childhood friend who started a company called True Ride. It was the premier skate park design build company in North America. They built it to be the kind of the premier skate park design build company in North America. And along the way, they started to explore and champion the use of innovative materials in the construction of their skate parks. A product called Rich Light. It's manufactured in Tacoma, Washington. Recycled paper, phenolic resin, highly durable, behaves like stone, but is machinable and manipulatable like wood, and makes a fantastic surface for the skate ramp proper. And well, when you're building skate parks and you're making radius cuts, you have a lot of fall down, and you want to try to use the whole buffalo, as they say. And so part of how the True Ride guys made use of those offcuts was actually by cutting squares and rectangles. And well, we're in Minnesota, so let's see if we can clean a fish on. Oh boy, it works pretty well for cleaning a fish. Maybe there's an idea here. And so that sort of was parlayed into a company called Epicurean Cutting Surfaces, which became a very large, successful cutting board empire based in northern Minnesota, since been sold off to Victorinox Swiss Army. And then on the sides of the ramps proper was high density polyethylene. And again, trying to maintain that sustainability narrative, they started to source HDPE panels that had recycled content in there. A lot of cool, vibrant colors. Same sort of story. There are offcuts. What are we going to do with them? Well, we're in Minnesota. Let's cut some skinny strips and make an Adirondack chair. And boy, this stuff's really durable and it looks really beautiful. That turned into a company many people know called Lull Designs, which is kind of mid-century modern inspired, beautiful, highly durable outdoor furniture. Well, turns out both of those materials had emerging A&D application. Architects, designers, contractors were starting to use these materials for exterior cladding, for bar tops, drink rails, and that's where Intextural was born as a distributor of primarily and initially those two materials.
What I'm amazed at already is just, and I think anyone who's an entrepreneur and, probably likes innovation. I just love hearing this, where you start with one thing and before you know it, it's spawned 5 or 6 or 7 or who knows how many companies,
right?
Because they keep on innovating to solve a primary goal. I always think of the famous story of duct tape, right? I think duct tape was a byproduct of, NASA trying to solve something else, and, out came duct tape.
Yeah. These are happy accidents.
Right.
There was no grand plan here.
Right.
It was open-mindedness, creativity, innovation, execution, and of course, in any business success story, it's just right time, right place, and a dash of good luck.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. So now, how involved are you between the two companies, between Arbor Wood and I'm going to butcher it, was it Inter-Architectural Company?
Intextural.
Intextural.
Yeah. So, on the masthead, I'm president of Intextural. Arbor Wood has been such a rocket ship that as CEO of Arbor Wood, it really demands a lot of my attention. We've got really good people. Dane is one of those good people that are helping Intextural continue to grow, and we've built out the product line within Intextural. Arbor Wood is kind of the breadwinner for Intextural as a regional reseller of Arbor Wood. So I'm, in a sense, able to kill two birds with one stone. By the stronger I can make Arbor Wood, it just therefore makes Intextural very strong as well. But Intextural was established in 2009. So, great time to start a company because it's only uphill from there, or downhill, depending on your vantage point, but it's only growth from there. You start in, with the worst economic condition that I've certainly had in my lifetime. And it's been growth year over year. We've never gone backwards ever since.
What year did Arbor Wood start?
Arbor Wood started in 2012.
Okay.
Yeah. And Arbor Wood started in 2012 as a brand within Intextural. And so here's where the origin story of Arbor Wood really begins. So Intextural, a few years of business under our belts, a nice little product portfolio being built. And we had established a relationship which we maintain to this day, very important relationship with the Natural Resources Research Institute, NRRI. It's an extension of the University of Minnesota, happens to be based in Duluth, Minnesota. And so the charter of the NRRI is to really support industry and economic development around Minnesota's natural resources. Obviously, fresh water is at the top of the list. There's mineral, there's timberland. And so we had a relationship with the NRI doing mechanical properties and product testing with some of these other materials. The wood research division within the NRI had some of the brightest minds really on a global scale driving innovation around wood and wood in the built environment. And so a gentleman named Pat Donahue, recently retired, was connected with an emerging technology called thermal modification. And thermal modification was really commercialized by the Finns. I mean, it's a Nordic tradition, but it was commercialized by the Finns and an extension of the Finnish government called the VTT in 1994. And so Pat Donahue, small world, happened to be at the vanguard in really helping Finland standardize and ultimately commercialize thermally modified wood. So we have this relationship with our textural hats on with the NRI, and the NRI approached us and said, "Hey guys, are you familiar with thermally modified wood? Seems like this could be a really natural fit for Intextural, just based on the types of materials and why you're sourcing these types of materials." And so that was 2012, and that's where Arbor Wood began.
And they probably looked around too, seeing that, hey, in Minnesota, if they're supporting Minnesota industry, we've got a lot of trees here
That's right.
in Minnesota. And obviously our climate would be pretty similar to Northern Scandinavia anyway.
That's right.
Interesting. Why? I mean, let's talk a little bit about thermally modified wood. You know,
Yeah.
I think, you know, it's really sexy and it seems kind of new, but I mean, this is old technology in some ways. And where
Yes.
I'm going with this is, you know, only because I kind of in love with it, like Shugiban.
Yeah.
You know, I did a little sauna a couple of years ago and during the COVID, and I was like, I mean, I know this was back in Japan. I mean, this is like, I don't even know how many, you know, centuries ago. And my understanding is they burn the wood to get rid of termites, to alter it. But I didn't realize this was kind of cool, that it was also to keep enemy arrows, flame arrows, from burning their homes.
That's right.
And so I joked with a client that I was trying to get to do Shugiban. It's like my one last sales pitch, like, hey, you need to do Shugiban on your house. And one last benefit is if your kid has a bow and arrow with a flaming arrow on it, your house won't burn down.
Yeah.
Turns out that was not compelling enough for him to spend the money on it, but I still like the sales line.
Yes.
With that kind of intro, like when did we as a modern society start really getting excited about thermally modified wood? And what are some of the old history patterns to it? Because you said the vanguard of 94 here in Finland where they commercialized it.
Yeah.
What up until that point sort of kept it from being commercialized?
In the United States, it seems like we're always 10 or 15 years behind some of the sustainability initiatives that are championed, say, in Europe. I mean, we see it with just building methodology and even, you know, climate control technologies and all of those things. There seems to be a 10-year kind of lag in adoption here. And I think that just has to do with, maybe it has to do with the wood lobby, the pressure treated lobby. Maybe it has to do with just, you know, builders who aren't familiar with things and they just know what's tried and true and their reputations are on the line. And so somebody has to be the proverbial guinea pig to try something new that hasn't been tried and true, that maybe doesn't have standardization in North America. And so it's just slow in adoption. And quite frankly, we're still there. Thermally modified wood is now a mature industry in Europe and really the rest of the world. And the United States is kind of the last frontier. It is the golden goose. I mean, it is the most desired market on the planet. And so we're seeing a lot of the European manufacturers really working to make landfall here. And so, you know, we're dealing with that on a competitive basis every day. And at some point that might lead to exploring different types of partnerships, maybe an exit at some point. I don't know. We're not really thinking about that yet. But you're right, Mark. I mean, the idea of converting the chemical properties of wood via heat or flame is centuries old, and the Asian cultures are the ones that most people think of with Shusugiban and the charring, kind of the conversion of food sources to no longer be food sources for rot and fungal activity, termites, as you mentioned. You've also really converted that outer layer to carbon, and so it's less combustible, like the flaming arrow story. So yeah, this is not a new concept. It's just it took somebody to try to place a value add to an underutilized natural resources, which was the Finns and, you know, the softwoods that they have in abundance in those Nordic countries. And that's kind of how thermal modification entered the marketplace. But we're still very much in the education phase. It is amazing that while from my seat, it seems like all I hear is thermo, and everybody is thermo, and people are starting to explore moving away from composites or moving away from engineered surfaces because now thermally modified wood is here. But yet on more of a macro or a consumer level, people don't know about it.
Yeah, and that's funny you say that. I was, as you were speaking to why, you know, the United States is 10 to 15 years behind, I suspect it's two things. One, the biggest one is education,
Mhm.
which you just touched on. I think also there's a big cultural element as well. And it's not necessarily a pro or con, it's just an observation. I've spoken about it on this podcast as well, is that, I think at scale, nobody builds homes faster and customizable than, the United States. I mean, we are the masters of stick framing. That doesn't make us the best home builders. It makes us the fastest at what we're talking about. And someone had also spoken about, like, post World War II, there's the baby boom, massive amount of homes that needed to be built. And it's funny because I do remodeling, and most homes in like the 50s and 60s and 70s aren't really that great. No offense to that era. They just need a lot of homes and they need them fast. And I feel like there's still a tail to that even to this day. People say, how fast can I build a home? It's changing as people get more and more educated, and as climate change becomes more and more prevalent to people's decision making abilities. That now, can we educate our clientele and saying, hey, you can build a smaller home that can be more richly detailed and have more of a story to it, but there's still a large percentage of our population that is not interested in that story.
Right.
And I think part of it is age. I look at, me specifically being a custom home builder. A lot of my clientele is 55 and older. And I've gone through a lot of, building science classes and education, and I'm not an expert by any means, but enough to be dangerous and to pitch ideas to my clients. And more often than not, they say no. And even if I educate them, they often come back to this preposition. I call it greenback green. He's like, is there a financial incentive to do this? And if it's not there for them, this is a complete stereotype, but it's been my experience, so it's true. They're not interested. Where I feel like the younger generation, especially those coming up, because if you are 20 years old, or I would say if you're 35 or younger, all you've heard about is carbon footprint, renewable energy, all these cool initiatives. I suspect that class of buyer and home buyer at some point is going to be way more in tune and is going to demand that. And so do you feel like you're kind of on a teeter totter of both education and we're trying to educate and produce this product for the people that can afford it, but they're not really there yet? To me, it seems like it's the generation coming. Is that
Yes,
accurate or
I think
not?
that's absolutely accurate, and I would extend that even to the demographic and the composition of the modern architectural firm, where you're seeing the younger generation move into positions of leadership. And so they're starting to think and inform and design around these concepts around embodied carbon and climate change. The building community and the design build folks are thinking about this. And yeah, I think the consumer, the younger generation of consumer, yeah, it's all they've known and all they've grown up with, and they've heard all the scary stories about what's happening with the planet, and so they're making decisions based on value and philosophy, and not so much based on the checkbook. And at some point, you need to have the checkbook because this stuff is expensive. And so, one of my jobs and one of our objectives with Arbor Wood Co. is to not make this a wealthy person's material, to find ways to make high performance, beautiful building materials that are gentle on the planet available to people that want them. And that's one of the things that excites me about the technology itself, is it's very species agnostic. It doesn't require hardwoods. It doesn't require tropical expensive woods. You can use underutilized, you can use southern yellow pine, you can use Doug fir, you can use species that grow in abundance. So, that really is the charge. I think you're not going to drive meaningful change unless you can make it available to all those people that care about it.
That's really helpful. I think, one of my preconceived questions even coming in, I think you've sort of answered, and it's, why is everywhere I go, like the trade shows and marketing materials, when I see thermally modified wood, it's like it's all coming from Europe. And I'm like, well, we have lots of trees, specifically in Minnesota. Like, why is there not more companies like yourself that are producing it? You obviously are, but it just, I mean, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but like when I go to a show or a trade show, is it fair to say it's 6-1, where it's a European-based company pitching me thermally modified wood versus a U.S. company? Is that about the
Yes.
right ratio?
Yes.
I mean, I understand that that's where it started. How can they be competitive? You have to do all the same. Their labor can't be that much less expensive. If anything, it's probably more.
Right.
The wood has got to be the same. You have to ship it over here and distribute it. How in the world could they even compete? Plus,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's tariffs. So how in the world would locally produced, let's say in this case it's Minnesota, but Minnesota, or sorry, in the United States, how in the world could the European counterparts even compete on thermally modified wood?
They're competing today on economies of scale because a lot of these folks have been in business for 20 or 30 years. They've got the process down. They crank out massive volume, and just simple economies of scale allows them to keep price point low. But you're right that both on a cost basis and on a carbon footprint basis, when they're shipping a container across the ocean, and in a lot of cases, they're sourcing North American fiber, bringing it over to Europe to be processed, and then bringing it back into this market for resale.
I mean, that's crazy.
You can shoot a lot of holes in that, right? And so we are price disruptive. We are price disruptive, even though we're small and we're growing. And when we're in the first or second chapter of our story, we're very intentional about being price disruptive. And we're not interested in a race to zero necessarily. But again, this goes back to making this available to as many people as possible. And vertical integration is a big part of that. And why aren't there more here? Well, the barrier to entry is pretty high. And if you want to do it right, and we're really trying to do it right, and vertical integration is a part of doing it right, it takes a lot of capital to do that. And we're fortunate that we have great private equity partners that have trusted us with a lot of money to pull this off.
I mean, I think it's just a cool story. Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, what actually, what thermally modified, I mean, if I could just take a stab at it, I mean, obviously you're taking heat, you're applying it to wood. Like, walk us through the details. So,
Sure.
I mean, who you buy the wood from, is it any different than any other sort of lumber procurement? I know I was just, looking on your website and some of the YouTube stuff that you published where, even some of the softwoods, whether it's yellow pine or wherever you're getting it in the United States, that you're actually even being thoughtful of how and where you're sourcing the material so that it aligns with your values, which I think is really cool. But then walk us through, like, once you receive the material, how you process it, how you store it, and then we'll eventually talk about marketing it and selling it.
So we work with pretty traditional sawmills, and we source kiln-dried timber in rough stock format. And
the same place that any other lumberyard would as well?
Exactly,
Okay.
Exactly. And we pull fairly tight specs that is somewhat in favor and in support of the modification process. It's primarily about aesthetics. We kind of subscribe to a garbage in, garbage out mentality that if you put garbage wood in with a lot of knots, with a lot of pitch in the wood, yeah, you can modify it, but it's not going to look great when it comes out of the kiln. So it starts with sourcing really good wood. And yeah, we're working with mills that are sourcing FSC fiber, SFI fiber. We're even working with the urban wood folks.
What does that even mean? I don't know what those fiber.
Yeah. So the FSC is the one most folks are familiar with. That's the Forest Stewardship Council. You'll see that on the back of a napkin.
Yes. Yep.
You'll see it on a straw. You'll see those. Yeah, those.
I've
acronyms.
seen the initials even on 2x4s and things like that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So basically, it's a set of criteria for sustainable forest management, how the forests are managed, and then it's maintaining, improving chain of custody from the time a tree is felled until a processor turns it into a finished widget and it enters the market. And so that chain of custody can be tracked all the way back to when it was still a standing tree.
Yeah. A local company like yourself being in Duluth, Minnesota, what percentage of your wood would be harvested in Minnesota?
Interesting question. Great question. So we are working on some proofs of concept on Minnesota species. Norway pine, red pine is one that we're working on. One of the crown jewels in our project portfolio is the beautiful Bell Museum of Natural History on the St. Paul campus of the University of Minnesota. That was all Minnesota grown eastern white pine that was sourced from within 2 hours of the job site. Very cool. Yeah. And so we're working on sourcing those sorts of species, testing them, running them through the whole battery of tests that we subject our products through to make sure that they're really fit to market. Right now, our product line is built around types of wood that have more precedent. North American white ash, southern yellow pine, red oak are kind of the three main ones. They're all sourced domestically. I would go so far as to say they're all sourced kind of in the middle part of the country from Michigan down to the southeast. But that's primarily the wood we're working with.
So then my next question was going to be, how much of it comes from Canada?
Nothing that we use right now comes from
Canada. I asked, the reason I bring this up is I've asked lumber yards as well, right? They're the big buying group, where they buy their lumber from. It's just interesting because I know, just because we have a lot of timber here in Minnesota specifically, if they're harvesting on large scales, it might be coming from different places. And it sounds like you're actively working on how to make it even closer. It's just, it didn't know the answer. So.
That's right. And I think for us, I mean, that's a little bit of eating your own dog food. We talk about sustainability, And sustainability is more than just the performance characteristics or even the modification attributes of the product itself, but all the way to just sourcing and how we operate as a company. And so, yeah.
So once you receive, the material,
Yep.
you're bringing it through kilns. Like, walk us through. Like you mentioned, you need a lot of capital on the front end. Is it in the equipment? Like, what is it that is required to thermally modified wood?
At the heart of our manufacturing facility is our modification kilns. And so these are specialized kilns. These are different than drying kilns that a lot of lumber folks might be familiar with. They sometimes look kind of the same, but the inner workings are a little bit different. The science behind all of this is called hydrolysis. And so it's a high heat process in an oxygen deprived environment. I mean, we're talking 200, 210 degrees Celsius. It's hot enough where the wood would otherwise combust. So we're pulling out the fuel source being oxygen so the wood doesn't start on fire. What happens at those high temperatures is a very specific degradation of the hemicellulose. And it's the hydroxyl group specifically that are impacted. And with that, we are forever changing the wood's relationship with water. So at its core, thermal modification is about changing wood's relationship with moisture. And when you do that, you improve biological durability, you improve dimensional stability. You're also cooking out the naturally occurring sugars that are a food source for mold, rot, decay, termites. It's even less attractive to woodpeckers. I mean, depending on what part of the country we're having sales conversations in, people are asking about termites or they're asking about woodpeckers. It's like, well, it isn't why we're thermally modifying, but it's an attribute of it. So it's the conversion of those sugars. It's the removal of all the stored water, the removal of the bound water, and then the breaking of the ability for wood to hold new moisture. And so the way it actually works is like your wicking fabric that you might use for skiing or running. Water will actually wick through the material. So it is not water repellent per se, but water moves through the mass and exits and doesn't hold that moisture. And so you have a board it's physically very light. And we hear that from the builder community where they really appreciate this beautiful ash 2x12 that they throw over their shoulders. And man, it's actually kind of light and easier to hoist up the scaffolding or up the ladder. Or when you're using it, say in skinning an overhead door application, it's less stress on the operating
I assume
mechanism.
that'd be akin to like the human body, I think is what, 70% water.
Yeah.
And so like, obviously if you're, walking in the desert, you're a little dry, you're going to probably lose some water weight. I assume that's the water weight of the wood.
Yes.
That is removed.
That's right.
Interesting.
That's right.
Why? Well, I'll finish this line of questioning before we go to the marketing side of it, which is where my brain always ends up going. So the wood comes out. It's been thermally modified. I assume at this point it's just a matter of storing it and shipping it. Are you guys doing stuff order specific? Are you stocking large quantities of material to just distribute, or what? I'm always kind of interested in, as a custom home builder, I do, 3 to 5 projects a year. Everything's one off, obviously. So I'm not storing, anything in this. I'm always intrigued by manufacturing because it feels like this other life that I'll never be a part of. I'm like, ooh, that sounds really sexy and cool, which I'm sure everyone who does whatever they do, they're always like, oh, the other industry is the cool one. Yes. But anyway, walk me through the manufacturing. Like, what excites you about it in terms of, I mean, well, I'll let you speak in your own words versus guessing.
Yeah. So we made a conscious decision when we really doubled down on Arbor Wood, and this is within the past 3 years where we've really mashed the gas pedal, received outside investment, built a state-of-the-art manufacturing plant, made an acquisition of another US-based processor to double our production capabilities. We made a conscious decision that in order to scale, we were going to sell through a distribution network. And so that is a series of single step and 2-step distributors. For people who aren't familiar with those terms, a 2-step distributor would be a company like a Blue Links, where you're feeding big distributors that feed wholesalers and lumber yards. You get access to 100 lumber yards in one shot because you're feeding the distributor that feeds them. And so we're really thinking in terms of truckload volume, feeding distributors, and having, your kind of 1 + 1 = 4, because you have now teams of salespeople, teams of product experts, regional fulfillment. Again, talking about sustainability, it's not ideal if I'm shipping a truck on a job lot out to California. I'd rather have a distributor holding product locally in California, and we do. So we do produce at scale, and we think about truckload volumes. The idea has been to produce enough to stay ahead of all the POs coming in. We've never gotten there. We're always playing catch up. It's a good problem, but it's a problem.
What would the leg be?
Right now we're a month, 5 weeks. We've had 10 to 12 week lead time. In the building material industry, that's not that bad. Some people have had to wait a year for windows or 6 months for windows, but we really do want to always be producing our standard big moving SKUs so that we have inventory on the ground. We'll get there,
I mean,
but
that's a good problem to have if the
yeah,
demand is outpacing the supply to a certain degree, right? If
yeah.
you go too far, you start ticking off your clients,
Mhm.
but it also speaks to to the demand of the actual product and the messaging.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive, the software for builders that automates draws, budgets, and bookkeeping with AI. For over a year now, I've been partnered with Adaptive, and they've just been an amazing game changer in terms of efficiency in our time and all our bookkeeping. From the time we get an invoice, we import it into their system. The AI codes it, cost codes it, job codes it. All we have to do is review it, pass it through the people internally in the office, all digitally, and then it gets approved and paid all via ACH. It's becoming extremely fast and saving us countless hours a day and a week. When it comes to draws, all of our budgets now are set in Adaptive as well. So now when we cost code against the draws, we can do our change orders, and then with a click of a button, we can submit these draws to our title companies or to our homeowners for faster payment. If you're looking to save time, and if you're looking to be accurate, I highly recommend Adaptive. Additionally, if you'd like to listen to one of their founders share the story of Adaptive, you can listen to episode number 15 on the Curious Builder Podcast. Lake Society magazine is Minneapolis' premier target market boutique lifestyle and design publication. It embodies the unique lifestyles and design of the Minneapolis City Lakes neighborhoods. From Lake of the Isles to Lake Harriet, it showcases the best in local design projects by both premier builders, architects, and interior designers in this area. Lake Society magazine has the look and feel of a national publication with glossy covers, high-end finishes. It's mailed directly to upper bracket single-family homeowners in the City Lakes area, and it's the perfect local coffee tabletop publication. Subscriptions can also be available through the website lakesocietymagazine.com. Additionally, publisher and founder Karen Steckel has over 27 years in the local magazine publishing industry and has a passion for high-end photography and quality graphics. Her commitment to quality, visual simplicity, and beauty are strongly reflected in her beautiful Lake Society magazine.
Yeah, I mean, just as an entrepreneur, one of the things that has been really fun about this journey is it's one of those moments in life, and they don't come along very often, where you get to be part of an industry that is emerging and unfolding in front of you real time. I mean, this is not like .com necessarily, or the folks who created Facebook necessarily, but it's on a smaller scale. It's kind of like that. Thermally modified wood, and really just modified wood or high performance natural building materials are kind of having their moment right now.
Do you think so? Being myself born and bred in Minnesota, and granted, I'm biased because I'm the son of a builder. So I like wood windows. I like wood trim. I'm kind of a wood snob just because I grew up around it. I just love it. I'm not a big fan of synthetic materials when I could have wood. It's not that I'm biased against synthetic. I'm only biased against it if I could choose wood. And right or wrong, because there are things that that we do need to synthesize that are better than wood. But in this case, what is the most common objection and or the most common thing that draws people to wood? And I'll use, let's say, cladding, for instance, like siding. Obviously our market specifically, and this is based on price point, you have, let's call it James Hardy or fiber cement boards to be, agnostic on the brand. You have, OSB based products like an LP siding or something like that. You have, of course, our natural products like cedar shake, things like that. What has been your experience of not only the builders and architects and clients that are attracted to your product versus the other synthetic products?
I think the attraction has always been there. When you look at the engineered products, the fiber cement, when you look at the composites, what is the texture?
Yeah.
It's wood embossed. So and composite decking, and not to throw shade at those products because they absolutely have their place and their application, and they're tremendous brands and tremendous success stories. Trex is a tremendous success story, but it was trying to give the look and feel of wood. So that was the attraction, without the what has been perceived as the reason people haven't used wood, and that is maintenance, upkeep, durability. And with thermally modified wood, and there are other ways that people are modifying wood, again, coming out of Europe, not just using heat and steam, that are now giving sort of new light, a new conversation. Well, now you can have that natural wood look and actually really use wood and have it hold up for 30 years.
That's a great answer, because you're right. As soon as you said it, it immediately clicked, because you're right. Being a home builder that advises my clientele on making business decisions based on value, I should say money decisions based on the value of what they perceive, they often will, not knowing, a client often doesn't know why they gravitate towards cedar shakes, whether it's the roof or the siding. And they often, now this is the con of maybe a younger generation. We talked about the pro, that they want more sustainability, but they also are far less likely to do maintenance on their own homes, as a general stereotype. And so it's interesting that I have oftentimes people come to me and say, I want to build a home that I never have to take care of. I'm like, that doesn't exist. I mean, if you own a home, there is a level of maintenance that is required as part of the. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's just you need to. It's us educating our clients. Going back full circle here is, I love the idea that those products you just mentioned are trying to imitate the vision and the look of real wood product. There must be something innately, I'm not going to say in humans, but that's where I'm going with this, is like we are drawn towards natural, organic, the way it makes us feel when we touch it and look at it. It's like our eyes can tell us what's different, even if our mind can't interpret what it is. Because I'll show a picture to a client, I'll know, hey, that's cedar shake on a East Coast Cape Cod house. It looks amazing, and they're like, I love this house. I'm like, you have excellent taste. That house is $4 million versus this house is over 700,000. Like, and they can't tell you why, but they can tell you what they like. Anyway, that's when I hear you tell that story, that's kind of what I associate.
Well, the industry has a label for that now, and it's biophilic design. And so biophilic design, and if you break apart bio and philic, is this proposition that humans have an innate desire to be connected to the natural environment. And so that extends all the way through to how we live, how we build our buildings, and therefore how we build our communities. And so you're seeing whether it's that living feature wall where you have plants going up and down vertically on a feature wall, right? Or using real wood products, using even stone. It's all about connection to that natural environment. I think it's really wired deep within us. And so you're exactly right. And that's where these technologies are starting to catch fire, because now you can tap into that notion, that biophilic design sort of natural tendency of us as humans, but also satisfy durability and performance. And here's where I also have to be careful, and where we're very intentional as a company when it comes to our marketing messaging and our education, that these natural methodologies for modifying wood make like supercharged wood, but it is still wood at the end of the day. It is still a natural material. There still has to be an embracing of inevitable patinaing and weathering of the material. It doesn't fall apart, but it takes on this organic, living, ever-evolving characteristic. And a lot of people are seeking that. And you're seeing designers really leaning into that as they're coming back to wood, as they're drawing away from composites. They're using wood in landscape furniture, in outdoor facade, in commercial boardwalks and walkway type structures. They're going all in on that. And there's some really cool products that we're starting to test coming out of Europe that protect the wood, but accelerate the visual weathering of it. So you can like pre-weather the wood so that when you install it day one, it looks weathered, but it's still going to last for 30 years.
That's just marketing.
Yep.
I mean, that's ultimately what that is,
That's
right?
right.
It's like, we want this wood to look patina. We don't even want it to look new. We want it to act new. We don't want to take care of it, but we want it to look like it's been here for 100 years.
It's like the $400 jeans that have all the holes and rips in them, right? You pay more for actually less material.
So awesome. That's a great analogy, actually. Oh, man. One of the things that I loved on your website that you had, which was micro level changes with macro level results. Talk to us a little bit about, I think we see so much in society about companies, and you do it way more than lip service. Obviously, it's clear that your product and what you're trying to shape so well, which is really commendable and really admirable to, even as a company, trying to find what your voice is or how you want to, niche down and make it your own. But, your commitment to sustainability, but also running a profitable business, because you employ how many people at Arbor Woods?
Yeah, we're knocking on 40 people now.
I mean, that's a big company. And where you're going to scale it's going to be a lot brighter than that. How is it that you're able to sort of take that messaging and kind of put rocket fuel on it and keep it going? Is education the number one thing? Like, how do we get more people to sort of understand? Because I think if you are one person, but like this message, I mean, I understand the podcast, YouTube, all these different things, but what has been your experience is the best way to get somebody who's, let's say, on the fence and to really kind of buy into and understand the value statement that this is? Because we make a ton of value statements on a home, and people's attention span is a lot shorter than this podcast.
Yeah.
Right. This is an hour going pretty deep in on this particular topic. Most people, I mean, myself included, a salesman calls me or anyone calls me. I mean, you have like what, 6 to 10 seconds to kind of make a judgment. Like, do I want to actually look or listen more on this product? How do you get deeper with people?
Yeah. Well, all of our messaging at its foundation has had an education tilt to it. So fundamentally, it's about education. And sometimes you get into the science and you always have to kind of find the right voice. But to your point about short attention spans, and quite frankly, we're fortunate because just the medium that we are dabbling in and the industry that we're in is visually very beautiful. And we're fortunate that our material ends up on very beautiful buildings. I was touring some in the Twin Cities Metro today even. And so it's easy for me to put some pretty pictures on the website or on the social media feed that capture people. And if you can get their attention for 10 seconds and you can drop a few attributes about how this material performs, looks beautiful, gentle on the planet, and you start to tug on the emotional heartstrings, then you've kind of got them on the line and you take it from there.
Okay.
Yeah. But it really starts with education. And I'll go so far as to say in the United States, we weren't the first people doing thermally modified wood by any means. And it's been a 15 years long, perhaps, movement in North America. And for the first decade, the early adopters, without any semblance of community or standardization, it was the wild, wild west. And there was a lot of bad product out there. And there's kind of a saying in our industry that anybody can cook wood and turn it brown, but that doesn't mean it's been thermally modified, right?
That is the best line.
And so there was some bad product out there that sullied customer perception. And I think circling back to that question about, why has it taken longer for adoption here in the United States? That's part of the problem, is a lack of cohesion and partnership within the industry, a lack of standardization and support at the, sort of from the top down, the way our building codes are written, all of that.
Where is the community at now? And what do you think the next 10 years looks like?
Well, we're trying to change that. We applied for and were awarded a very substantial grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture to create the standard for thermally modified wood.
You specifically, Arbor Woods?
Us specifically.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yep. And so we've assembled a team with the academic world. We're working with folks at Oregon State University, Michigan Tech University. Of course, our colleagues at NRRI are going to be a part of this. Also, some private sector wood preservation folks are part of our team, but we are running point on a 3-year project to write the standard for thermally modified wood. This is completely a high tide, raise all ships thing. This will not be our intellectual property. It's nothing that we're going to monetize. It's simply helping to elevate, bring validity to this market to help everybody out. And we're really excited about that. And we think that's very important work. We've worked hard. We worked hard to win this money. We're working very hard on the grant project itself. We have found our way in a leadership capacity onto governing technical committees with some of the wood lobby, like the AWPA, for example, who will actually be the body to write the standard and incorporate that. So for us, this is deeper than just an entrepreneurial move to try to make some money or have a cool story. I mean, we truly are trying to change an industry, trying to change how we think about our buildings and our communities.
I have to imagine, I've heard we had the owners of Pella on. Actually, it was episode 1, almost 2 years ago now. And Ed Engelbrecht said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what I'm hearing through all of this is that the culture, I have to imagine the people that come to work for you or want to work for you, I imagine it attracts people that are extremely passionate. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Yeah. And it's humbling, and it's also challenging because my LinkedIn daily, certainly weekly, is blown up with people reaching out, wanting to be in our orbit, whether it's they're looking for a job or whatever it is. And that's really cool. It's very, very gratifying. I wish I could hire them all. But to me, one of the most motivational aspects of what I'm doing as CEO is it's Andrew, our sales director, who works remotely. And when I see him on a Teams call and he's built all types of Arbor Wood swag and signage and little sculptures and logos behind him, he's doing that because he loves what he does and he loves the company that he works for. And that's way bigger than I mean, he's a part of what that is. And it's just, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a founder, like that to me is the most satisfying thing. That's what I get up every morning for, is to provide good jobs for people that feel inspired, feel inspired, feel passionate about what they're doing. I've worked jobs that I've lost that fire. And so I want to create an environment where people don't ever feel that.
I think, I don't know if you have children. I've got 3, and I often think when they're old enough, and I've talked about a lot on the podcast, but just, passion. Like, I honestly don't care what they do for a career. I just want people to be passionate about what they do. One of my past clients, one of my favorite clients, a really interesting thinker, and he quoted me one time. He said, "If you're constantly thinking about retirement, perhaps you've chosen the wrong career." And that's been rattling around rent free in my brain for a while. Just about, how do you not only, let's say, people often say, how do you get passionate? I don't know the answer to that, because I'm passionate about a lot of things, but I think find whatever it is you're passionate about, and then find a way to work on it. And I think a lot of times, people are passionate about something, and, just because you're passionate about it doesn't make it a business entity. Right. And so I think sometimes that's where I think having people around you to give you perspective. But at the end of the day, like, a lot of things that are created are just, it's a lot of will and a lot of love and a lot of passion. And somehow, like you said, on the way to discovery one thing, a new business was formed, and it kind of keeps on evolving. And then now you get someone like yourself who can, shape it and let people like your marketing director really have a place to blossom. I mean, it's super admirable. I think that's why we all love entrepreneurship, because you see this thing opening up and you're like, I never would have seen that happening. And it inspires you again. It's like your inspiration inspires them. And now what they've done comes back and sort of feeds your engine. Is that accurate?
Right. Absolutely. It's, and it should be bigger than the individual who maybe catalyzed the thing. And that's when you've really succeeded, I think. Mm-hmm. And passion is contagious. When I'm passionate and I enjoy talking about what we do, and people pick up on that and they want to be a part of it, and it builds good culture, and you find good people and you retain those people, and you develop sales and you grow sales, because people are inspired by people that are passionate about something.
There's got to be a good story with, you're talking about thermally modified wood. You've got to build a sauna. And I know there's a lot of good sauna companies up in Duluth, but build a sauna out of all Arbor Wood, and then thermally modify yourself.
Yes.
Like you're a new human being. You're like, you're Captain America.
It's like a twice baked potato.
Exactly.
Yeah. We've done that. And that's actually a really interesting emerging vertical for us. Sauna culture is having a moment as well, and the whole cold plunge and that wellness thing. I think the pandemic really kind of ignited that, but we sell into the sauna space. We've got some great manufacturers down here in the metro, really fantastic manufacturer up in Duluth, Cedar and Stone, that uses a lot of Arbor Wood. It's visually beautiful. It just fits the whole Nordic thing. But we've actually found, from a performance perspective, interestingly enough, not just exterior cladding on the envelope of the structure, but actually in the hot room. We were fortunate enough to be specified on an incredible project in Vail, Colorado. In fact, I think it was the highest sell price of an existing home in Vail. It was a $50 million home, and they put another 30 or something ridiculous. But part of what they did in the sort of renovation of this home is build a beautiful spa, interior sauna. The whole inside of the hot room is all our thermally modified ash. And what we've been told, and I believe this is the reduced moisture content, the lower heat mass and heat absorption, is that it's actually cooler to the touch than some traditional woods are. So even on a performance basis, thermally modified wood does work.
I mean, you're 100% right. We'll even talk about this offline. We've just announced it maybe a week or two ago. It's on our website. We're actually doing a sauna and cold plunge retreat here with the Curious Builder locally at Lake Minnewaska, which is where we're recording, is 5 minutes away. And they have a guy called the Sauna Poppy, but you have all these saunas set up, and, just a way to bring I just love everything about the sauna culture. And actually we have a few sauna makers coming on the podcast at some point.
That's great.
So we'll have to talk a little bit more about speccing Arbor Wood in their saunas for sure. From where do you see the industry going? What does the next 10 years look like? What does the next 20 years look like?
I think you'll continue to see adoption of these natural building materials, naturally modified wood, thermally modified wood being probably the largest subset of that. Mm-hmm. What we're seeing right now is a movement expanding beyond the traditional envelope. So we're seeing furniture manufacturers. We're working with very large blue chip furniture manufacturers that have large outdoor collections, historically using teak or tropical hardwoods like ipe or machiche or kumaro. And they're now becoming hip to this thermally modified wood thing. And so we're seeing it in furniture. We're seeing it in musical instruments, where modified wood is being used for guitar necks and bridges due to its stability and its machinability. Its aesthetics. It's beautiful. I mean, it has kind of a richer color because of the conversion of the sugars. I've even had conversations with boutique stand-up paddleboard and boutique ski and snowboard manufacturers that want to use it because it's light and it's stable. So I think that we're just at the tip of the iceberg, actually. Yeah.
There's I remember I mostly downhill ski, but I remember I snowboard a little bit, and I think there a snowboard company called Arbor. Snowboard?
There
Do
is.
they have a wood snowboard, Arbor Wood with Arbor?
They don't have an Arbor Wood, but I do think they use wood cores.
All right, I think we might have to do some collaboration there.
That's
for the
right.
Custom snowboard. One of the things I was going to ask you is, what other industries do you kind of aspire could be a good word. When I was thinking about you and your company specifically, I think of some companies that have done an amazing job with the whole sustainability piece, in our culture, not necessarily building, but I was thinking about Patagonia, Code Epoxy. I'm an outdoor enthusiast. I love those. And they really live and breathe their message, and the people that follow them equally love it. Where do you look for inspiration about how to create your business and sort of the mentality and keeping true to that passion outside of, let's say, the building community?
Patagonia is one that we talk about a lot.
Yep.
Patagonia, Red Wing is a company we admire. We really want to lean into US-based manufacturing. We're proud to be an American company. We're proud to use American fiber and create jobs here in the United States. And we also care about the planet. And so for us, it's deeper and more fundamental than just the material itself. And I think Patagonia is a great example, of that. It's where we source our wood. I mean, one of the really fun programs that we're early on with is our Carbon Smart Wood program. So we've actually partnered with a company based out kind of in the East Coast who has taken the urban wood model, which is largely a regional program where people are sourcing wood felled through disaster, decay, urban development. A lot of times that wood is chipped and ends up in a landfill, but we're working with the Carbon Smart Wood folks who have line of sight on truly tens of millions of board feet of very good wood that otherwise just gets wasted. They sort it, process it, they maintain chain of custody, reintroduce it into the supply chain.
What do you mean by wasted? Why would it be wasted? Because it just falls and rots versus it being harvested right then and there when it's damaged?
Or oftentimes, let's say somebody is building a new multifamily development and they're going to cut down 500 trees. It historically hasn't been top of mind to make sure that wood goes to good use. It'll get chipped, it ends up in a landfill, and that's that. And so what we're able to do is actually prevent that from happening, identify that wood, identify the wood that fits our spec, go through the processing necessary to then reintroduce that back into the market as a beautiful deck board or a tongue and groove siding plank.
I think one of the things, and maybe we'll kind of, before we end, I just want to talk a little bit about the different segments of your product. So, I mean, you've got siding, decking, and dimensional lumber. Are those are the three places right now for the wood materials?
those would be the three broad categories. Yep.
And what percentage of, let's say, sales or demand would be on which one of those? I'm just trying to gauge like which sector basically is creating the most demand.
Yeah, siding for sure. 60 to 70% siding. I would say it's 20, 25, 30% decking. And then dimensional lumber, which is a broad label, but it's 1x2s all the way up to a nominal 2x12, is a growing segment for us because that originally was sill trim detail, but we're seeing it for pergolas. We're seeing it for bench slats. We're seeing it used for some other finish, making fire pits or planters. So really anywhere wood is used, you can use Arbor Wood.
Right. Oh, interesting. I'm thinking of right now we're working on a project and I think it was Alaskan cedar was what was spec'd. And now I'm thinking, man, your product would actually work really well for this. It's just funny how when you frame your thought process a little bit differently, how many things all of a sudden now it can apply to. Because I think originally when we discovered you, it was siding. And then thinking about now as you kind of get educated on the different products and what you can do. You're like, oh, this kind of opens up some different doors that where you could apply it. What from a competition standpoint, not locally within thermally modified wood, but I assume in terms of the overall industry, PVC, the synthetic products, what would the percentage of, let's say, real wood, whether it's just regular cedar that people have been using forever versus thermally modified. So let's just take all natural materials versus anything non-natural. What would be the split roughly, do you think, on siding and decking?
I would say our biggest competition is the non-natural materials.
But any idea? Was it like 90-10, 80-20, 95-5? Like what would
it's a good question. I would say it's 80 to 90%. We're not going against Western red cedar. We're not going against, I mean, we are to some extent, but it's infrequent. We're not necessarily trying to battle against the big European juggernauts who've been doing thermally modified wood. We're battling against composite decking. We're battling against engineered fiber cement siding. Almost exclusively. And when I say battle maybe isn't the right word, because it's an awareness thing. I mean, a lot of people just aren't aware of it. And even when they're aware of it, they just don't know enough about it. They haven't seen it enough. They haven't felt it. They haven't, so that's part of the work right now.
From a marketing standpoint, other than the guy who's building everything in his on the Zoom calls that we'd love to see, how do you address marketing? How do you look at marketing? I know we talk about education, and I assume agreeing to come on this podcast, things like that, are a big part of education. But in some ways, most of the listeners here would be builders, or architects, designers, people in the industry. So the trickle effect is going to be really positive here. I don't think a lot of my homeowners necessarily listen to it. They're certainly welcome to, but I guess where I'm going with this is like from the funnel standpoint, how do you look at marketing? Where are you spending the majority of your time kind of pushing your educational platforms and knowledge to? Is it to show homes? Is it to trade shows? Is it to builders? Walk us a little bit through your marketing strategies.
It really started and still to this day is centered around digital marketing. So digital marketing is the core of what we do. We think of ourselves when we're having sort of business development conversations, we think of ourselves as a media company that happens to be in the manufacturing of wood products business. And so it's social media. We do pretty well on social media. We have, 5-figure Instagram followers, which is, not record breaking, but nothing to shake a stick at either. And we've worked very hard at that. It's harnessing the algorithm. It's understanding how to maximize your investment and spending and boosting content. We've done a lot of work in SEO, thought leadership on our website, blog posts, information sharing. I mean, it's part of education, awareness raising, and it's also just understanding how to harness the power of the algorithm to be discoverable. We've focused on that more, and we've had a lot of traction and a lot of success. And I would say we've way, I don't want to say we've outpunted the coverage. It's more we've punched well above our weight in that regard. The amount of money that I've spent based on what I've got in return has been a big success.
I would, based on your earlier comment, the product is pretty sexy. I mean, there has to be the visual element, which you already spoke to, has to be a huge reason why people engage with it so rarely. People want to touch it. They want to feel it. I mean, I have the sample deck in the office. I mean, when I go places, people want to touch, they're instinctively drawn to try to connect with it.
Right.
And I feel like that has to be a strong pull, in your marketing too, that people are left with like, oh, well, how do I get this? What is this? I think curiosity. I think that the underlying, obviously it's a call up to the show, but I guess that's really the base of all of us. Like it's hard to educate someone who isn't curious.
Yes.
And I think your product naturally is like, what is that? Is that stain? Is that a coating? Like, how did they do that? And I do think that process ends up leading to a lot of questions that then you dispatch, like, here's our sales rep, here's our story.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of where it leads to the education.
Absolutely. And we do trade shows. And so that's kind of, you mentioned seeing us at IBS. We'll be at IBS in 2025 in an even bigger way. And we're realizing that we've put a lot of eggs in the digital basket, and we need to also nurture more traditional, especially, not every custom home builder is on Instagram, so you have to be at the shows. But every single show, somebody is going to pick our product up and they sniff it. And this is composite, right? What's in this? No, it's just wood. It's just wood. Really, this is just wood? And then and then you have the conversation. But it takes that kind of tactile experience. And so the pictures are great. The pictures capture attention. The pictures get them in the tippy top of the funnel, But to start to convert and to have more meaningful, tangible conversations, you have to get product in front of people. And so that's where the rubber meets the road. And there's a lot of power in getting samples. And so we've done a lot of work and put a lot of investments in elegant, fairly sophisticated sampling experiences. There are sampling platforms that have emerged as sort of the de facto way for the modern designer to actually curate and find new materials. The days of the large physical material library at an architectural studio are kind of going away for more collaborative digital design studios. And so making sure we're on all the right platforms so that people can find us. We've spent a lot of time and money making sure we're on the Material Bank and Swatchbox, and we've got BIM models and all of those things. So yeah,
a lot to go there.
Yeah.
Well, as we kind of coast into the end here, maybe switch things a little bit to just on the personal side. I always find it kind of interesting for an entrepreneurial standpoint, like, what are you interested in outside of work? And how do you self-educate? How do you stay motivated?
Yeah. So I think, mental health is as important as physical health when you're an entrepreneur, especially early stages when you're grinding it out. It's stressful. It's hard work. It's anxiety inducing. You're questioning yourself every day. So I try to be very intentional at taking care of my brain and taking care of my body. It's why I live in Minnesota. It's why I live in northern Minnesota. I love trail running. I love riding gravel bikes. I love skiing, Nordic skiing, downhill skiing. I do yoga. My wife owns a yoga studio, so I have access to a bunch of free yoga classes and yoga instructors. To me, I think that's really important. But I'm a constant lifelong learner. I just love to learn. I was blessed with that gift from my parents, who always made learning fun. Whatever it is that I'm into, whether it's bikes, skis, guitars, music, or thermally modified wood, I just am on a constant quest for knowledge. And so I think as an entrepreneur, as a business leader in general, I think you just have to have that mentality. You're never done. You're never done learning. And so sometimes you just have to be intentional about it. And sometimes just keep your mind open and you will just learn. Keep your eyes and ears open.
I think we could have a yoga and Arbor Wood collab. I think of all the yoga studios I've been in, with the synthetic LVT or whatever wood floor for wiping up the sweat. I mean, there's a lot of yoga studios and bar studios in the country. I think they could all be converted into some Arbor Wood floors.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much for coming on. If people want to reach out to you personally, LinkedIn, the website, what's the best way for your LinkedIn is pretty full. If you want to come work for you, maybe I have to come up with a new way than LinkedIn because you're getting inundated. But what are the best places to find out more about Arbor Wood as well as yourself personally?
Yeah, you can certainly find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. Our website will get you in some way or fashion to me, arborwoodco.com. We're active on Instagram. We're on Facebook. We're on all the channels. We're on Pinterest. We're on YouTube. If you just query Arbor Wood Co., you will find us. In fact, thanks to my marketing team, if you just query thermally modified wood, we're going to be the number one organic search return. So
nice.
Easy to find us.
Very good. Well, thanks again for coming on, John. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mark. Absolutely.
Yep. We are happy to announce that we have a one-to-one coaching session that can be found on our Curious Builder podcast platform. So you can book a time with me and it'll be 1 hour to ask any sort of questions that you want, talk about business, talk about life, talk about scheduling. Maybe you're dealing with a difficult client and you just want to maybe shop with another builder and say, hey, how do I handle this? Or maybe you're looking to rebrand your company. Whatever it might be, you can head to our website and book a time, and I'd be happy to sit down and give you that hour and we can talk about whatever's on your mind. We're excited to announce that we have partnered with Harnish Workwear. They're an amazing shirt company. I'm actually wearing it right now if you're on YouTube. Softest shirt I've ever had. Also the most durable. There's a reason these guys make shirts for workwear. If you head to our Curious Builder webpage under the merch channel, you'll see we have a limited time only of our pre-launch of the Curious Builder shirt. We also have our new monogram that's going to be on the back with a cool little custom tag. If you want to support the show, if you want to support what you're listening and small businesses, both for Harnish as well as the Curious Builder, please go there, buy a shirt, buy two, give one to one of your colleagues, maybe one of the tradesmen that you think might like the show, and you're supporting a small business and you're supporting this podcast. So I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.